I'll give you an example of a question that is probably the most common question that you will start getting when you start flipping your instruction. And this will come first from colleagues, then from parents, then from friends. And the question is, what happens if they don't watch the videos? Now, this question I've learned to interpret in a couple of interesting ways. So I've noticed that this question really means that people are misinterpreting flipped class as something that it's not. So let's talk about the assumptions built into this question. The assumption is that flipped class, for instance, is only videos for homework, projects, and class that requires mastery of the content with no steps to scaffold learning in between. So recognizing that this question really indicates a misunderstanding of what a flipped class is the first step to being able to address your colleagues' concerns and, of course, gaining buy-in. By contrast, you can point out that flipped class does value and make time to master content simply by moving the direct instruction outside of class. You embrace making mistakes as part of the learning process, and you support learning through mistakes in your classroom with you there to guide as an expert. Furthermore, the other thing this question really indicates is that the person asking it thinks the Prussian paradigm adequately solves this problem already. So it indicates kind of a level of ignorance with the needs of the 21st century learner and the fact that the current paradigm was designed in the 1890s. The assumption is that kids in the Prussian paradigm enter with the mastery of low-level skills, and anyone who's in a classroom knows that that simply is not true. It also assumes that kids learn from direct instruction, and to point out that that often is not the case, you could ask your colleague to consider how often students are paying full attention while they are engaged in direct instruction. Point out problems of classroom management during direct instruction. There are students on cell phones. They're not asking good questions. They're not able to take notes. They are distracted by their peers. It's not a purposeful use of time. It also assumes, for instance, that kids actually complete traditional homework, and furthermore, that if they do complete it, that they're learning from it. So you could point out to your colleagues that there are situations where students copy each other. There are websites such as SparkNotes that students use very, very well to regurgitate without understanding information. By pushing a basic understanding of the foundational groundwork for the instruction outside of class, you are more likely to ensure that students walk in the door with the requisite skills and the requisite knowledge to engage in the lesson of that day, which a traditional Prussian paradigm classroom simply cannot ensure. Also, I would suggest that if the sorts of questions your homework is, traditional homework that is, has been asking, are the sorts of questions that can be answered simply by Googling a question, that we need to be asking better questions, that in 2013, the main goal of the learner should not be to collect data, that a better use of a student's mind and a student's talents, and yours and mine as well, is to analyze, reflect, and stand on the shoulders of giants and move us forward. So in conclusion, this video is intended to model the process by which I gained stakeholder buy-in. Your next steps ought to be to consider what are the pros and cons of flipping as you see them and get better at telling that story. You need to consider who your stakeholders are. Are they the same as mine? Do they include other groups? Consider what are their common concerns, what are their demographic specific concerns, and what are various groups ignorant about and need your expertise in terms of helping them to understand. And then last, consider how a flipped class better addresses student needs than does a traditional class. Again, you need to be able to tell this story believably to a variety of people who will challenge you. When challenged by those critics, you need to be able to explain your pedagogy with sources often and eloquently. By doing those things, I think that you will be more likely to gain buy-in from all stakeholders while transitioning from the Prussian paradigm to a flipped classroom.